Hey everyone, I'm Teela with Deep English. Thank you for joining me for another lesson today. Today we'll be learning 5 idioms that have deeper meanings. So an idiom is a phrase or an expression whose meaning isn't necessarily obvious. And so even if you know every single word within the idiom and you understand its meaning, you may not understand the meaning of the idiom itself. And so that's why it's so important that you take some time to learn and memorize a few idioms in English. Idioms are really common in the English language. And so I think it's even easier to remember idioms and their meanings if you also know a bit about their history. Because anytime that we can bring story into our learning, it's easier for our brain to remember and understand what we're learning. So let's get started. Our first idiom is to bury the hatchet. To bury the hatchet. So if we were looking at this literally, we would see that to bury the hatchet could mean to just dig a hole and bury a hatchet, which is a small axe. So that's not what this expression actually means when used today. We're going to find out what it means, but first, let's take a look at its history. So to bury the hatchet probably came from the 1600s when English settlers and Native Americans were trying to negotiate peace in North America. And so while they were trying to negotiate peace, the Native Americans would dig a hole and bury all of their weapons. So they would actually make their weapons inaccessible so that no one could pick up an axe or any weapon and destroy their attempts at peace. So actually burying their weapons. So after hearing this story, can you guess what it means to bury the hatchet? I'll give you a moment to see if you can guess. If you guessed that to bury the hatchet means to make peace, you're right. So great job. So we might use the expression to bury the hatchet in a sentence like, I didn't want to fight with him anymore about whether or not he owed me money, so we decided just to bury the hatchet and forget about it. To bury the hatchet. Or in my own life, there was this one time when my sister said that my small dog had peed on her carpet, but she hadn't seen it. She was just saying she saw a little spot and she thought that's what it was. Because my dogs never pee inside, I couldn't believe it, so I said, no, this couldn't be true. We fought about it for days, and then we realized that we'd never know, and so we decided to just bury the hatchet and let it go. So to bury the hatchet, to make peace. Do you think it's a good idea to bury the hatchet? Let us know what you think below. Or have you ever buried the hatchet? I'd love to read about an experience you've had burying the hatchet. All right, let's move on. Our second idiom is to butter someone up. To butter someone up. So if we were looking at this literally, we might think that it meant to spread butter on a person, like we would toast. But that's not what this one means. First, let's look a little bit at the history of this expression. So we are not sure where this expression comes from, but many believe that it may have come from a time in ancient India where religious devotees would throw butter balls at statues of their gods, asking for favor and forgiveness. So, after hearing this story, can you guess what it might mean to butter someone up? To butter someone up. I'll give you a moment. Okay, let's see if you got it right. To butter someone up means to make them feel good by complimenting them or saying nice things to them, flattering them. So to butter them up, making them feel good. So we might use this idiom in a sentence like, the little boy really wanted his mom to buy him a toy. And so he decided to butter her up by telling her he loved her new dress, by holding her hand, smiling sweetly at her as they walked through the store together. So he was buttering his mom up. Or, let's see, I remember a time in my own life where I was in college and I missed my final exam. I thought it was on a different day. So I knew I would have to butter the professor up so that she'd allow me to take the exam on a different day. And so when I got into her office, I told her how much I loved her class, how much I enjoyed her teaching style. And while it was all true, I was also really buttering her up. And she let me take the exam a different day, so it worked. Have you ever had a time where you buttered someone up or where you've been buttered up? Feel free to comment below. I'd love to read about that experience. Our third idiom is to break the ice. To break the ice. So if we look at this one literally, we might think that it means to simply crush up ice, to break ice apart. But that's not what this one actually means. And so it's such a good thing that you're learning this now. So let's look at the history of this one. This one may have come from a time when trade ships would be trying to get through the ocean in the winter, but there would be all of this ice so they couldn't get through. What would happen was the country that was receiving the ship would send out smaller ships to break up the ice so that the bigger ship could get through. And so this was seen as a sign of goodwill, of affiliation, of working together. So they would actually break up the ice for the big trade ship to get through. Okay, so now that you know the history, what do you think it means to break the ice? This one is a little trickier. I'll give you a moment. Okay, so this one actually means to begin a friendship or to be the first one to speak, maybe in a crowd of people, to introduce yourself. So to start a connection. So we might use this expression in a sentence like, the room was silent, no one else was speaking, so I decided to break the ice by introducing myself. Or in one of my favorite stories ever, my roommate, my old college roommate, used this expression to basically introduce herself to a guy. So let me tell you this story because I think it's really funny. So I had a roommate in college who was newly single. And we were out one night and she saw a guy she thought was really handsome and she wanted to talk to him. So she walked up to him, but she got so nervous she didn't know how to break the ice. The only thing she could think of was a joke that she had read on a gum wrapper. And so she says to the guy, "How much does a polar bear weigh?" And he says, "I have no idea," looking all confused. And she says, "It weighs enough to break the ice." Do you get it? How much does a polar bear weigh? Enough to break the ice. And so she was actually breaking the ice with this joke. Isn't to break the ice a great expression? I love that one. It's also a funny one. Can you think of a time when you broke the ice? Or maybe when you didn't break the ice and you wish you would have? Feel free to let us know below. All right, let's move on to our fourth idiom. To throw the baby out with the bathwater. To throw the baby out with the bathwater. Usually we say this as, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. So don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. So this one, if we looked at it literally, would be to throw a baby out with the bathwater. Of course, that's not what it really means. Let's look a little bit at its history. So this one probably came from a time in the 1500s when people only bathed like once a year. So bathing was seen as immoral, but it was also thought to cause disease. So people really didn't like to bathe. And so once a year, a family would fill up a bathtub, and first the men would bathe, and then using the same water, women would bathe after. And then by the time the children and babies were bathing, the water was filthy, it was dark, it was really dirty, and so the joke was that you could barely see the baby. So the poor mothers had to make sure that they didn't throw the baby out when they emptied the bathwater. So to throw the baby out when you empty the bathwater, you don't want to do that. So can you guess what "don't throw the baby out with the bathwater" means? I'll give you a moment. Okay, let's see if you guessed this one right. don't throw the baby out with the bathwater means don't throw away valuable things when you're getting rid of things that aren't necessary. So, for example, we might use this in a sentence like, the woman didn't like her coworker, so she decided to look for another job. But I told her, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Just ask if you can have your desk moved so you're not sitting by that coworker. Or let's see, something like, the man really loved his house, but he wished that there was more closet space. So he decided, rather than throwing the baby out with the bathwater and looking for a new house, that instead he would just find a way to make more space in his closet. So maybe he remodeled or something. So don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Don't get rid of valuable things just because you're getting rid of things that aren't necessary. Can you think of a time when you've thrown the baby out with the bathwater? I certainly hope that you haven't, but if you have and you want to share below, feel free to do so. I'm sure that some of those stories would be pretty entertaining. Okay, let's move on to our fifth and final idiom. To give someone the cold shoulder. To give someone the cold shoulder. So if we look at this one literally, we might think that it meant to give someone a shoulder that is cold. Of course, this isn't really what it means. So let's take a look at the history. So this one's history is a bit controversial. We aren't sure where it comes from, but it may have come from medieval England. During a dinner party, when the host was ready for the guest to leave, they would serve the guest a piece of cold shoulder meat. So this was supposed to be a polite way of saying, okay, you can leave now, or maybe you should leave now. I don't think it's very polite, and I think it's really gross. Imagine getting just a piece of cold meat, and then you're supposed to know, okay, it's time to leave. How strange and gross is that? So now that you know the history of giving someone a cold shoulder, what do you think that expression means today? I'll give you a moment. I'll do my little dance while you think. Okay, let's see if you were right. To give someone the cold shoulder means to be unfriendly or to be dismissive or maybe even to ignore the person. So this one was a little tricky. So we might use this expression in a sentence like, after I found out that he had a girlfriend and he lied to me, I saw him at the grocery store, but I just gave him the cold shoulder instead of talking to him. So I ignored him. Or at work, she gave me the cold shoulder and I realized, oh, she must have found out that I got the promotion instead of her. So the cold shoulder, to give someone the cold shoulder, to be unfriendly or to even ignore them, to be aloof maybe. So giving someone the cold shoulder. Have you ever given someone the cold shoulder? Has someone ever given you the cold shoulder? If someone gives me the cold shoulder, I always just ask them, hey, why are you giving me the cold shoulder? Because I don't like to play those kinds of games. What do you do when someone gives you the cold shoulder? Feel free to let us know below. Okay, that does it for our lesson today. We learned 5 idioms with deeper meanings. I hope you had as much fun as I did. If you liked this lesson, feel free to give us a like, to subscribe, to comment below. If you are interested in getting more free content or a free lesson, sign up for our free English course below. Thank you guys so much. I can't wait for our next lesson together. See you later. Wait a minute. Before you go, I would love if you would comment below and tell me something about yourself. It seems like I'm always telling you a little bit about me, but I'd also love to hear about you. So comment below in English and maybe tell me where you're from or what you love to do with your free time. So comment below. I'll be sure to read them all.